Good morning, and thank you for joining the Paul Call. My name is Dylan Keith, Policy Analyst at the Vegas Chamber. Before we get started, I'd like to go over some features of this call. If you are using the desktop or mobile Zoom applications, you may type a question at any time using the question pane at the bottom of the screen. We will answer as many questions as possible at the end of the presentation. Likewise, you are highly encouraged to ask questions live. Use the hand raise button at the bottom of your screen, and as we open up for questions, we will call your name and unmute your line. Please ensure you are unmuted on your end, and please keep questions brief so we can get to as many as possible. And now, it is my pleasure to introduce Vegas Chamber President and CEO, Mary Beth Seawald.
Thank you so much, Dylan. I appreciate that. I also want to thank CenturyLink for sponsoring the Paul Call today. We're so grateful for their support. We couldn't do the Paul Call or a lot of the programming that we're able to provide to you without the great support of our sponsors like CenturyLink. So thanks again. As legislative session progresses, and we're wrapping up week 3 already, I can't believe how time flies. There are a lot of proposals in Carson City that, if passed, they would be very harmful to our employers and small businesses. And that's why your engagement as a chamber member in Carson City is absolutely paramount to our success there, especially during these challenging times. So I really want to encourage you all, and I sound like a broken record because I think I've said this on about 4 other Zoom calls today. I want to encourage everybody to sign up for our Chamber Advocates program, because becoming a chamber advocate is one of the most helpful things that you can do during this legislative session. It's no secret that this session is probably going to be the most challenging one and the toughest one that we've had for our business community. There are already several proposals that'll make it even more challenging to operate a business and to keep people employed. So as a chamber advocate, it really gives you the opportunity to amplify all of our voices by sharing with lawmakers and our community that what would be the real impacts of a proposal, or that a proposal would have on your business and your employees. So for more information, we encourage you to go to vegaschamber.com. Another way to stay informed this legislative session is to make sure that you engage in all the communications that we have at the Vegas Chamber, like the Paul Call, the rundown that is produced every Friday during the session with the latest legislative news. And then periodically we'll issue calls to action. So it's a way to keep you engaged and informed. So we really highly recommend that you take advantage of all the resources that we have at the Vegas Chamber. So now I want to turn it over to Paul Moradkhan, who is the Senior Vice President of Government Affairs. Hey, Paul.
Hey, Mary Beth, and thanks so much for the introduction, of course. And I want to thank Mary Beth for her leadership and her efforts to really make sure our members have an opportunity to be engaged this legislative session. To her point, there are a lot of bills coming out that we have concerns about, and we'll be working through them, of course, with legislators. But I want to thank her for her leadership. And also to reiterate her thank you to CenturyLink for being the sponsor of this series for our members during the legislative session. So thank you, CenturyLink. As Mary Beth indicated, we're already almost end of week 3, which is kind of amazing when you're about only 17 weeks of a session, 120 days. So when we come back on Monday, we'll have less than 100 days of the session left to go. As of right now, just some quick fact numbers. As of today, there's a little over 1,000 BDRs that have been submitted to the Legislative Counsel Bureau that will eventually become bills. As of this morning, 144 Assembly bills have been released and 129 Senate bills have been released. So you're looking at about 273 bills. It's a little lower than usual because of the challenge that have been with the virtual process, with the building being reduced on staff, because of COVID. So we're seeing a little slower pace on the bills that are being released. We anticipate we'll see a large release of bills in the next week or two. And most of those bills at that point will be personal bills that have been brought forth by legislators. The majority of the current bills we have seen have been committee bills or bills on behalf of agencies or different departments within the state. So the vast majority of the 273 is really committee bills that may have been heard and developed during the interim period or been brought forth like GOED or the State Department of Education or a DEER. So a lot more agency committee bills. Typically, you'll see the release of these legislative bills in the next week or two. As you know, there's a formula to how many bills can be released by a legislator. Incumbents get about 10, freshmen, I think, get 7, and it varies between the House and the Senate. So a lot more to be watching for in the next few weeks. I think it's important to share with members regarding conversation about taxes and what happens and what is going on with that. The governor did not put in the state of the state a revenue package or a tax package, but there are groups that are advocating for tax increase to help shore up the state budget because of the impact that COVID has had on state revenue. There's a part of that is separate from that conversation because with the current administration and President Biden, they're signaling that the next stimulus package will have state and local relief dollars, kind of what we saw in that very first package in March of 2020. There's a potential that there will be an infusion of revenue help from the feds into the states across the country to help shore up their budget shortfalls with the lost revenue from COVID. There is a policy conversation happening on the national level. Several states before COVID were already experiencing budget problems. Nevada was not one of those, actually. The budget was looking good. There was potential for a little bit of a surplus. So Nevada's financial concerns have been because of COVID, not because of overspending or mismanagement of dollars. So I think that's an important nuance to have. But regardless if there's a state assistance or not from the feds, this revenue coalition would like to see changes in additions to the state's tax base. And majority of these would all come from the business community through mining or live entertainment tax, a capital gains excise tax, an alcohol tax, digital goods, and then capturing room tax and car rental collection from Airbnb type business and programs. So these conversations are still very much happening in the virtual building with interest groups and NGOs and coalition members. The chamber has always had a position about opposing specific industry taxation. We don't think it's broad-based. We don't think it's predictable or stable. And it's not the right way to look at a policy issue on taxation. So that's typically where you'll see the chamber come out in opposition if it's going after one specific industry. Now, at times, an industry will come forward and they'll develop their own tax package for a variety of reasons, either policy or political or a combination of both. And then that's a different conversation the chamber will have with that industry. But just want everybody to know just that it is still going on. Any tax increase that I just mentioned on that list would take 2/3. Anytime you raise the rate to generate more revenue, it triggers that 2/3 vote from the Senate and the Assembly to move a tax package forward. Some of the constitutional amendments that are coming back or being introduced are, I think, are important for our members to know about. One is AJR 1 from the special session. This would deal with the mining industry on a specific rate increase on their proceeds of mineral taxes extracted. The chamber opposed that bill, as I mentioned, because of the industry-specific taxation. AGR 10 was heard last session. It'll come back a second time on a minimum wage increase. This brings it up to 11 and 12. The current federal raise the wage makes up to 15. Nevada's minimum wage is different, where we offer $1 consent credit if you offer healthcare. And so that would change with the federal standard if it's adopted by Congress through their federal action. And then SGR 1 is another provision regarding a mining tax again. So the chamber has been on the record opposing AGR 1 and AGR 10. And both of those will have to go to the voters, if passed again this cycle by the legislative body, to voters in November 2022. Because the process is that past 2 regular sessions, in theory, it will only take 1 time by the voters in November 2022 to change the Constitution. In terms of where the chamber is on tracking bills right now, as Mary Beth indicated, there's quite a few that have been released, and there's BDRs that we're watching. Between the bills introduced and the BDRs, we're at 603 out of a little over 1,000. So it's about 60%. That's typically where we hover at for tracking numbers, anywhere from 60 to 66% of all bills. And you're probably wondering, what bills are we getting involved with? Well, collective bargaining, healthcare, patient protection, employer retaliation, right to repair, employment liability, worker comp, business liability, pay equity, non-disclosure agreements, merger acquisitions, taxes, of course, LET and property tax. There are two property tax bills, and I highlighted here on the slide because there are two specific bills already been submitted. One is Senate Bill 10 from NACO. NACO is the Nevada Association of County and Organizations. And then Senate Bill 64 has been introduced by the Nevada League of Cities. Same topic, but they both do very different functions with property tax. SB 10, and just speaking in a very novice perspective, would create a floor of how low a property tax can go on a property, either residential or commercial, while Senate Bill 64 takes a more holistic, more of a comprehensive reform effort to property tax to generate some additional revenue for cities. Neither one of these have been scheduled for a hearing yet. The chamber is currently reviewing both bills to understand the financial impact it would have on the commercial sector side. And then there's also the residential side on that. Both bills will have commercial and residential. You can't just carve one out and just do a residential increase or commercial increase. You have to have both of them in because of equity and parity issues. That's defined by the Constitution of the state. We're also talking about predictive scheduling, revisiting the focus on mission of GOED, some potential rollback on abatements. There are several GOED bills being heard today. One's on film tax credit. One is tightening the timeline of when applications have to be submitted and fulfilled for abatements. There's a rent control and eviction bill that now been brought forward on the assembly side. This will also impact commercial evictions. Once it's residential, the chamber will track it, but when it impacts commercial sector, then we absolutely do get engaged. So we'll be working very closely with NAOP, who represents the commercial real estate industry, and we'll be working with their team. Fiscal home rule, the city of Reno has two bills regarding this. The chamber has a long history of opposing fiscal home rule. Per the state practice and also dictated by Nevada revised statute, Nevada is what they call a Dillon rule state. Dillon rule is built off of a court case at the end of the 18th century, turn of the 19th century, where basically the state specifically has to dictate authority to local governments for fiscal control or authority. So if it's silent in the Constitution and arrests, then it's assumed that that power stays in Carson City through the legislative house. And that is the chamber's preferred method because that provides more stability to our members on taxes and what role local governments can tax on. A good example of a home rule state is California. As you know, very rarely does the chamber agree with what we see out of California. So just puts in some context. Senator Kendra Zero has a BDR and an extension potentially on paid time off, and we'll work with her on that, of course. Assemblywoman Leslie Cohen has a BDR on emission standards and climate change. Many of you have heard about the opportunity zones that the governor has proposed through his state of state. And that is something that we're still waiting on the formal language on. But basically, in a high-level synopsis, it will allow private sector industry to really create their own economic zone through land, through a county that will be managed by the private sector. So innovative idea, a lot of questions that still need to be vetted through and talked about, but something the chamber will closely watch and see if it's the right fit for Nevada. And we'll share members more information as we get that available, of course. There is a bill that's been dropped. A BDR that's going to be dropped for members. It's called the Responsible Gas Planning Law. It's something we're currently looking at and we'll be engaging on. But basically, the synopsis is it's kind of part of that clean energy program that's being talked about at the Nevada level and at the national level. The state moved away from coal burning and power plants, and now there's conversations about changing the use of natural gas in the state with a multi-year approach of phasing out natural gas in the state for residential and commercial. The chamber is, like I said, reviewing this. We want to make sure we understand all the nuances, and we'll keep members updated on that. But this kind of gives you a timeline of what the proposed timeline will do, shifting natural gas and moving that to the electrification grid in the state. So it would be by 2050, we would see 95% of those efforts put onto the grid that would be produced by either wind, solar, through electricity generation. A couple other bills currently the chamber is engaging on actively. AB 45 and AB 47. 45 is an insurance bill. And it really specifically deals with section 2 of the bill about the insurance commissioner being able to revoke a license without a hearing. Chamber typically thinks our leadership believes there should be a hearing component before you revoke a license. We are having good conversations with the insurance office about it. But as of right now, as written, the chamber is opposed. AB 47 is labeled technically as an unfair trade practice bill, but that bill really does 3 things in its original format: mergers and acquisition regulations, really elimination or severe restriction on non-compete covenants, and then healthcare provisions. The Attorney General's office has been very actively engaged on this. They had stakeholder meetings. So we're seeing progress being made on the non-compete part, narrowing this bill down to more just a healthcare than a broad-based sector impact on merger and acquisitions. There's also SB 75, which is an employment compensation bill that's been brought forward by Dieter. It would change the way how the formula would be handled, of how they handle your experience and rating for your unemployment insurance tax rate. It would go from 10-year to 20-year factor, taking 3 of the major economic downturns into that formula. There has been a proposal on an amendment from one of the support staff / teachers union group to allow 9, 10, and 11th month employees to collect unemployment. The chamber isn't now opposing the bill. Look, the chamber supports educators. We just are on the record supporting bills. But if you knowingly take a 9 or 10 or 11-month job, I think there's a philosophical disagreement. Then you should then be able to collect unemployment insurance for that month or 2 you're not working. And the concern from the chamber is those dollars would be taken out of the classroom to pay for those unemployment costs for someone that knowingly took a job that's only 9 or 10 or 11 months. That's a personal decision they make, and that should not be impacting on student budgets on the classroom. There's also some other BDRs that just for the group to watch. We're waiting for more of these personal legislative bills to come out. Like I mentioned, digital goods and relating to business. Senator Spearman has some bills also out there we're tracking once we get the full bill language. Senate Bill 95 is a bill by Senator Orenthal that allows Nevada to be more competitive with Delaware with our business entity filings, something Nevada and Delaware are always constantly competing to be the most business-friendly registered agent state. So, we'll propose something and they'll propose something. And so it's always one of us is always catching up to the other one, I guess, best way of putting it. And then there's a new bill that was just dropped this week that was originally a BDR from Solomon B. Duran. It's the Nevada Pay Equity Act, what it's called. It will make pay equity discrimination illegal once again in Nevada. It's currently illegal. It will make it illegal again. The chamber has no issue with that piece of it, of course, but there are some components of the bill about asking for wage history from an employee that we have concerns about. That the bill will allow you no longer ask for that. And there's also a recent court case from the Ninth Circuit Court about if this is just codifying what the Ninth Circuit did, or if it goes further beyond that. We're having employment lawyers looking at it. We're talking on the national scene what it looks like. So we will have a conversation with someone, B. Duran, next week about it, and we'll keep our members updated on that. So those are some of the BDRs on that front. Yesterday, there was a hearing on the PUC that would impact our utility members in gas, power, and telecom. The original proposal raised the daily fine rate to 100,000, 200,000 a day. The cap was raised to 20 million. Significant exponential growth in those fees. Basically added 2 zeros to every single fine structure. We understand that it has not been updated in decades, but that unprecedented fine structure is just too much from the chamber perspective. And something that we're currently opposing. And then again, mentioned the property tax bills. City of Reno has SB 73 and SB 11 that would give them taxing authority. Chambers opposed to those. Again, back to that Dillon rule principle. At the Chamber of Commerce, we believe those matters should be left to the state body, where there's a legislative process where you can have those thoughtful, more dialogue conversations that may not always occur if it was given to local government. So that is an overview of right now what's happening in the state capitol. So really, we'll open up the calls for questions from members and see if members have any questions at this time, Dylan.
We do have a question from Josh Haldeman. Can
Sure.
you elaborate more on any of the details within the eviction rule and what is being proposed?
Sure. The bill just came out, so we haven't had a chance to fully go through it yet, but I believe it's AB 114 by Sumlin Watts. It would, in theory, make it harder for evictions to occur, but we will definitely keep you updated on that bill. But it's been introduced by Howard Watts, and language just became available, I believe, yesterday. But it will impact commercial industry too. So that's why the chamber will work with NAOP and Nevada Realtors on that bill and work with the stakeholders on the bill to mitigate as much concern as possible. And I think that's part of the larger conversation for folks is that obviously a lot of these bills are being driven by the COVID-19 pandemic. We want to ensure that, just because it's something that's currently happening today, how that's going to impact policy in the long term. So we are asking legislators to take that perspective too, that as the vaccines are rolling out, more of the population is being vaccinated, and we have a better understanding of this virus, that some of these bills may overcorrect the situation. And so our goal is to find that appropriate middle ground or compromise space. Dylan, are there any other questions from members today?
I am not seeing any other questions at this time.
All right, great. Well, of course, for our members, if you do, my contact information is available. You always get me on my cell at 702-810-9124. Our team's always available evenings and weekends, of course, during session. So if you have any questions, drop a phone call or email, and we'll be happy to respond back as soon as possible. I'd like to thank CenturyLink for their sponsor of the poll call for the session. Our next one will be, I believe, the first week of March on March 4th at 11 a.m. So join us join us at that time for the latest updates from Carson City. Thank you to Dylan for his help as always, and Mary Beth for joining us for today's call. And thank you to our members for your membership of the Vegas Chamber. Have a great day.